Welcome to RainierAvenueRadio.world. This is, again, part of our community election connection. And we are going to be discussing, keep that up, Daniel, I like that. Turn the music back up. Yeah, no need to get rid of that just yet. By the way, that's original music. That's the music that you hear all the time during the news. And so I thought that we would use that during the broadcast. So welcome to our community election connection. We're going to be bringing you debates, interviews, information that you need to know so that you can be a more informed voter during this 2020 electoral season. And now, there are more than just more debates than just presidential debates. And I know that there's also the vice presidential debate, which is coming up on a national level. But locally, we have coming up a debate between our candidates for governor, Lauren Culp and the incumbent Jay Inslee. This debate is put on by what's called the Washington Debate Association. So we're going to talk about debates. Now, as you know, we're having several debates. We just had an exciting debate for Supreme Court Justice Position 6. If you have not had an opportunity, or you think that that is not relevant to you, I highly suggest you go back and listen to that debate. Now, back to the subject of debates. We saw recently in a presidential debate something that I think everyone agrees didn't provide a whole lot of information. What are debates? You know, what is the purpose of this thing? You know, a debate is supposed to be a process that involves formal discussion on a particular topic. And in a debate, opposing arguments are put forward to argue for opposing viewpoints. Debates occur in a number of different settings. There's lots of different types of debates. There's competitive debates, and I think generally you would think a debate, even if it's a heated debate, you know, from two people who are trying to resolve their issue and not use violence and using words or persuasion or whatever it may be. Maybe to say that's a debate. But what we're going to find out here tonight is about what you should expect, about what this process is, and really at the end of the day, what do you think is best for the country in this process of having debates? We haven't always done it, but we have consistently since 1976. Joining me on the program from Seattle City Club and also Washington Debate Association, and I'm going to have to get our guest to kind of figure out how those two work together, is Whitney Keys. Whitney, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Tony. Thank you.
Well, good to have you on the show.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
So you heard me just briefly run through this mishmash of this process of debates. When you hear debate, when you think of debate, what does it mean? And just for you personally, how would you define debate?
Well, for me personally, it is just what you were explaining. It's this opportunity to have an exchange of ideas with another person who might feel differently from you and have a different perspective. And it's done in a responsible, respectful way. So it can be a lively conversation, but it's not disrespectful at all. And in some cases, a debate also includes moderators who are going to ask questions, and then you're looking for the participants to actually answer those questions and provide clear information so the people listening can make some assessment about these individuals and their points of view. All
right. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page, because what happened at that last debate, I don't know if that was really a debate or not.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The last presidential debate. You know, we have honest, open conversation here. But if you hadn't seen a debate before, anyway, that's what I'm saying. Hey, they've been taking place. You may not have felt like you got anything out of that. And if I'm wrong, I'm just wrong. But I'm just saying. So the debate coming up is between our governor, for gubernatorial candidates. But I want to talk about the Washington Debate Association and Seattle City Club. But before that, let's talk about your background. How did you end up in the position of being with the executive director of Seattle City Club?
Well, my career's been a little bit of a meandering river instead of a straight line, which has made it a very great experience for me in my life. I'm from Tacoma originally, and I grew up in a family where I had two artists as professors, and we had an art business in our house. So I grew up in an entrepreneurial household where my brother and I were helping my parents make our artwork and keep that business. And I ended up working after school for my family business and running that for a while. And then I got very involved in city politics and city government. I was advocating for small businesses at that time in Tacoma. There were some underserved districts that weren't getting funding from the city and so forth. So I became very involved with the urban planning department and city council, and ended up working for the city of Tacoma in a neighborhood business district program that was helping the communities thrive. And then at the time, my husband was working at Microsoft doing a long commute from Tacoma. So I ended up changing careers and went to work for Microsoft for many years, doing marketing, communication. And I was there during the time when people may not remember this, but Microsoft was being investigated by the Department of Justice for being a monopoly and not having the best business practices. So that was an exciting time to be there. And then I ended up leaving and going back to my small business roots, and I started my own consulting business where I was working a lot with entrepreneurs and artists and helping them do marketing and communicate their businesses. And then I've just always looked for opportunities that involve responsible leadership and strategic communication, those types of things. So I've had a few other different jobs. And when this opportunity came up, it was just right 2 weeks before COVID hit. They were looking for an executive director to step in and help at this time. So I've been there ever since.
That was way cooler than me just reading your bio. You know, we have an hour, so we have a little time here. Well, Whitney, thank you again for joining us. And now let's talk a little bit about Seattle City Club. We'll start with that, and then the connection with the Washington Debate Association. Let's start with Seattle City Club. Who is Seattle City Club?
Seattle City Club has a pretty interesting background. It was started in the 80s by 8 women who were excluded from local civics and democratic processes. People may not remember, but certainly from a racial point of view, people have been excluded, and from a gender point of view, at that time, women were not involved in kind of male-only Rotary types of clubs and things like that. So they had an inclusive mindset to create a new type of civics organization. And so they started it 40 years ago, and it was open to anyone, and it created free open access to people to hold elected officials accountable, learn about civic issues and all kinds of social issues that impact our lives here in the region. And today we are still moving forward with that mission of being inclusive and creating programs and services that help inform, engage, and connect people around civic issues to just help make our region much stronger.
Okay, and the Washington Debate Association.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. It's even a little longer. It's the Washington State Debate Coalition.
Oh, okay. The Washington State
close.
Debate Coalition.
Yep. And what it is City Club started it back in 2016 because we, again, wanted people in Washington to have access to people that are running for office and going to be in these very important positions that are going to impact the future of all of us. So we formed this coalition, which is mostly volunteers from the community. Myself and a staff member sit on this coalition as well, are some of our board members, but we have all different perspectives coming together. And what we also do is we partner with media outlets, so TV stations, radio stations like this one, newspapers.
Not a lot like this one. I'm
not
just
a
saying.
Lot, like not very.
Not
many.
A lot like this one. If you're going to say that, I'm saying you can go ahead. But but not a lot like this one. But yes, just to
One challenge, Tony, I appreciate you bringing that up, is my understanding is historically when this was started, a lot of groups could sort of ask candidates to come and again do some private event with them or a private debate, and they weren't open to everyone. And so City Club tried to create this coalition to make those types of forums more open. And I think historically it has been the more traditional TV stations since in the past people would watch debates primarily on TV. That's how a lot of people would access them. But moving forward, we have worked really hard to try to have more media partners. Right now, the main media partners, it is on TV. It's a televised debate. So those media partners kick in and they help bring satellite trucks and they help provide expensive microphones. And part of the coalition is they've got to contribute and they've got to help make sure that this is successful. And if a candidate doesn't want to do a debate, we've got that coalition of media partners behind us. But to your point, this year especially, we have tried to work broadly across the state and look for different kind of non-traditional and independent media outlets. But they have to agree to air the debate at a certain time, so it does impact programming sometimes. So there's a lot of negotiation to try to see if media outlets will carve out the time for an hour to air this debate for their audiences.
All right, we're going to talk about that later because that's a different conversation.
All right.
But we are going to have it. This is not a gotcha interview. It's just an interview. But what I want to do, and thank you for addressing it, we'll talk about that a little bit later. I want to talk about the process that you go through when it comes to putting something like this together. Again, we see from the end result, and probably for most folks, again, it's the presidential debates. I mentioned before that there are all types of debates that take place. There's a debating society. But in this particular instance, again, and we kind of define what debate means, what does that start to look like? How do you start to put together as the rules, if you would say, about what this debate is going to consist of, what it's going to be about?
Well, we're a bit fortunate in that we started this coalition 4 years ago. So we do have some rules and guidelines and processes that have evolved over the years as we've had input from candidates, from the public, from our media partners. But we did start, certainly when I joined City Club back in February, we were already starting to plan these debates. And this is, keep in mind, pre-COVID. So we were anticipating doing physical events at college campuses or some public venue where a lot of people would have access to come. We were just starting to explore where those might be, and then COVID hit this year. So it threw us a big curveball in trying to figure out, can we even hold these debates? What do they look like? As you know, and your listeners know, people have been all over the map with respecting public health guidelines, or what are the public health guidelines. So we weren't sure if we could have these candidates physically together or if they'd have to be separate. All these types of questions came up for us. So it's been a lot of work of trying to figure out how we can still, despite COVID and despite everything else going on, right? We've had horrific racial injustice happening across our country and here locally. We've had wildfires, we've had so many things happen, but we feel that we still, all the more reason, we have to hold people accountable and create an opportunity to hear their ideas when they are going to be our elected officials one day soon.
All right. And what about the logistics that went into this in regards to, doing this? Again, it's going to be virtual. That's one thing that you can share with it, just the change in that. And then the other thing, again, just kind of the behind the scenes. You've got two candidates. You've got to get them to agree to do it. And is that a negotiation? Is it how does that work out so that everyone says, okay, these are the rules? Is there an exchange that goes on about what's going to be discussed, or is it just open season? Anything that the moderators come up with is on the table?
It's definitely not open season. It's definitely, we try to be more structured and organized, but it is challenging because I think at this time in our country, you often have candidates that in some cases, don't like each other, aren't talking to each other. You have parties that are, unfortunately, in those situations, as we know, our country and our communities are very polarized. So it can be challenging. But we work very hard, and our coalition tries to share the exact information with all parties at the same time. And then we're open to questions if they need clarification and so forth. But it is a very interesting dance of trying to make sure that we're coordinating. Once we get the results back over the summer of who the two main candidates are going to be, then we really need to jump into action and start contacting their campaign managers and coordinating all these logistics.
we're talking about what goes into a debate, and in this particular situation, the gubernatorial debate, which is taking place tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Governor Jay Inslee, the incumbent, and Lauren Culp, candidate. And again, here, let me show folks this, because I think you should always do here. This right here. There's information in here that you can find on just about everything that is going on. This is King County, so it may look different if you're in another county, but in regards to things that are statewide, you can find information in here. And again, these are, I'm just going to, read a little bit of this. Elected experience. You go through this. Jay Inslee, Washington State House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives, attorney, and education, and then with Lauren Culp, and he just has it in here. Elected experience, no information submitted. Other professional experience, no information submitted. Education, no information submitted. Now, I'm not saying that he should or should not submit information. What I'm saying is that who's ever running for whatever office, you should be interested in who they are and what their background is, whether they're the incumbent or not the incumbent. And hopefully, this debate will address some of the issues and concerns that are important to you about what you want to see in this state. And I'm going to go back to our guest, Whitney Keys, Executive Director of Seattle City Club, and let me get it right now, Washington State Debate Coalition.
Perfect.
Who are the moderators for the debate that's going to be taking place?
Well, the moderators, so we actually have two debates. I know you're focusing on the gubernatorial one. So for this one coming up tomorrow night, I'm going to look at my notes, but it's Chris Daniels from King 5. It's Brandy Cruz from Q13. It's Essex Porter from Cairo 7. And it's Melissa Santos from KCTS 9 and Crosscut. So there are going to be 4 different moderators for that one.
And the other debate?
And the other debate is going to be on October 22nd. It's for the lieutenant governor position, which is an important position when you think about it, because if Biden were to win, there's been a lot of speculation going on. Jay Inslee could be tapped on the shoulder to move into some type of position in that kind of national leadership role. And so that would mean that the person that we vote into lieutenant governor could have expanded leadership opportunities. So that one is happening on the 22nd of this month at the same time slot, 8 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the moderators for that one are Jessica Janner Castro from King 5, Michelle Esteban from Como, and Mike McClanahan from TVW. And I believe we just added someone from Eastern Washington as well, from our Northwest Public Broadcasting Network.
And that segues into, that's a perfect segue actually, into, how do you do this so that statewide everyone feels like they're going to get what they need out of this? I know that, again, you have to have a format in place, which means that you want this to be interesting to everybody all over the state. What's the process of, I guess I would just say, incorporating into debate the needs of the state, maybe the needs of a particular county? How does that work out?
We did start this year really wanting to expand and be sure that we are being inclusive of everyone across the state, and it's not easy to do. We're a very small nonprofit with very limited resources. I have a handful of staff members helping me, and we have a handful of volunteers on the steering committee. But we did make that effort and reach out to a lot of different media outlets, and media outlets come to us as well. And since we were just talking about the moderators, that again is part of the agreement between our main media partners, is in exchange for a lot of help and a lot of resources, whether that's time or, again, technical support, then they are able to suggest a moderator. And this year we were originally going to try to do 3 debates, and because of COVID and some other logistical challenges, we had to only do 2. So that limited the number of moderators, because we can't have 10 moderators asking too many questions, or we wouldn't hear from the candidates. And then we have a huge outreach program. We partnered with several universities and other volunteers to try to reach out. We did our own research with our team, trying to identify all kinds of civics organizations and youth-based organizations, race-based organizations. The sky's the limit, that care about civics and democracy, and to try to send them information about these upcoming debates and to see if they wanted to sign on and, again, agree to help promote it, and if they have media opportunities, kind of share it in that way.
My guest again is Whitney Keys, Executive Director of Seattle City Club, and also the Washington State Debate Coalition. We're talking about debates now. Obviously, you know, there are 2 debates, but the debate that we're talking about is coming up, the Gubernatorial Debate. Whitney, what are essentially the rules, you know, so that we can anticipate the way that this thing is supposed to work?
Let's keep our fingers crossed that we could do a better job here in Washington than on the national level. But the rules are that it's to be a respectful exchange of ideas, and that we're going to have these moderators who are professional journalists that are going to balance out questions and have a range of questions that are issues that are on top of mind for everyone in Washington. We did have a process where people in Washington can submit questions that will be given to the moderators for consideration as well. But we can anticipate a range of topics. It might be transportation, criminal justice system changes, our environmental issues that we're experiencing, the usual things that all of us are keeping top of mind in Washington. And then it's just a normal debate process where we did a coin toss to be fair, and that is the process that we used, and that was kind of fun. We had to do it on Zoom because we couldn't be in person, but to decide which candidate would speak first and who has the closing remarks, because that's a competitive opportunity for one of those candidates. And then process-wise, we will have moderators that are very respectful, limited in their time to ask questions, and each candidate can ask questions and then answer and so forth. So the typical process that you see will be moderated, and we do a lot of prep with our moderators. We do rehearsals. Everyone is coached on this. The candidates are told exactly how it's going to work. So fingers crossed, our candidates will be respectful to each other and to the process and the moderators.
You're listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. We've got a debate coming up tomorrow night. It's the gubernatorial debate. And again, the candidates are the incumbent, Jay Inslee, and Lauren Culp. And I'm just going to read a little bit. Again, you can get this information. Just done this the old school way, and you can get this information. What I did, if you're just listening and you're not watching, was held up the voters pamphlet, and so again. Just a brief statement here. The people of Washington, this is a statement from Jay Inslee. The people of Washington are resilient and deserve leadership that reflects their character. Jay Inslee's proven experience in difficult times and his successful economic vision are exactly what Washington needs as we rebuild our economy and help families and business recover from the pandemic. And a statement from Lauren Culp. Lauren was born in Everett and is a lifelong Washington resident, except during his service in the U.S. Army's 101st Airborne Division. He currently serves as the Chief of Police in Republic, Washington, and is a best-selling author. For over 20 years, he owned and operated a construction company in Olympia, Washington, before moving to Republic and joining the law enforcement community. Again, just a little information on Lauren Culp. Hopefully at this debate, you'll have the opportunity to have some of the questions answered by the candidates. They're important to you. You'll be able to watch this. And again, as I mentioned before, it hasn't always been that way. It just 1976 is when things got started back. 1960 was, I guess you'd say, the first. I mean, you can, if you want to go way, 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 way back, there's this Lincoln Douglas debates, which is a whole nother thing. And, you know, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that as we get to this point. But at the end of the day, this is something that should allow you the opportunity to help you become a more informed voter. At the end of the day, it's your vote, and you get to use it in any way that you want to. Now, what the candidates are going to do is try to convince you to vote for them. What parties are going to do is try to do the same thing. And you know what? Maybe even your friends and relatives are doing it. That's what happens during the election season, but it is your vote. What would you call a success, Whitney? When the debate is over, what will have been a success for you and the Washington State Debate Coalition?
I appreciate that question. I will answer it, and I want to share one thing that you keep reminding me of when you're holding up that voters pamphlet, and because I appreciate you encouraging people to get informed in their own way. And I know some people reading that old school pamphlet, even though I have it too, Tony, it's on my kitchen counter. But I want people to know that if you prefer audio, like listening to this type of show, or video, I just learned myself that TVW, which is our state-run government TV program, they on their website have a whole bunch of video recordings of every single candidate. So you can also go to that website and watch those videos and see and interact with the candidates kind of on their own words and get a little more sense of who they are from those types of pamphlets.
Yeah, and good point. And you know what? The pamphlet's just one thing. Do your due diligence to do whatever you can. I know people are busy, so I'm trying to give you a shortcut with the pamphlet. But check as many resources as you possibly can. And yes, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to people in your community, talk to your elected officials, talk to everybody you can. Do your due diligence. This is just an opportunity, one way to help keep you more informed. But it's your vote. But yeah, anyway, so what'll be a success at the end of the day for this debate?
Well, I think personally a success for me is that we put on this debate from a debate point of view, that we put it on, that it was respectful, that people were able to hear these two candidates talk about their ideas and answer questions about, again, all kinds of issues that might come up, whether they're talking about economic future of jobs in our region, whether they're talking about changes that need to happen when it comes to police reform, whether they're talking about impact of it, COVID on education, whatever topics come up, that people who want to vote have access to that information, can hear clearly. They're not talking all over each other. They're not arguing. You can actually hear their points of view. And people leave those debates being more informed. And I also think it's important to call out, there are people that aren't able to vote yet. You know, if you're not a citizen, for example, of Washington, you're not able to vote. I still think that the work that we're doing is helping people stay informed on issues, even if you can't vote or you choose to not vote, or maybe you're not eligible to vote for a while. So success to me is giving people access to these individuals who have chosen and been voted in so far to move to this very important position where they might be leading our state and leading issues that impact all of our lives. And people are informed and they come away feeling really confident about their decisions that they're going to make.
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back. My guest is Whitney Keys from the Washington State Debate Coalition and also Seattle City Club. We're going to talk a little bit more about the debate, and then we're also going to, again, find out about what it is that maybe you would like to hear, you know, about in a debate, and what you think might be effective for you to get information so that you can be more aware and more informed. When we come back right after this.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not meeting Mrs. Jones in that cafe for a chat and nothing else, I'm listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world.
What up, y'all? Check out the show. Check out the big show. I'm talking about the Traffic Jam Drive Time Radio, Dirty Harry Radio. Of course, Rainier Avenue Radio, Traffic Jam 4 to 6. If I could say it in multiple languages, I would, but I only know one. I'm not going to fake the funk. In the studio with my guy,
Kareem the Dream, the executive producer for Rainier Avenue Radio.
And all the females, all the beautiful women out there are telling me he really is a dream, and I'll say, you know what? That's all I needed to hear. Too much information, but Dirty Harry. All right, check out the show Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 on Rainier Avenue Radio. Contest, in-studio interviews, play-by-plays. We give you the ingredients. We're your chefs in the kitchen. Let's go. Kareem the Dream, Dirty Harry, Rainier Avenue Radio. Come on.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned humanity must stop, quote-unquote, waging war on a nation at the United Nations' first ever summit on the biodiversity crisis today. He said one consequence of the imbalance with nature caused by deforestation, climate change, and food production was the emergence of deadly diseases such as HIV/AIDS, Ebola, and COVID-19. Earlier this month, the UN published a major assessment that found none of the 20 global biodiversity targets agreed 10 years ago with the 2020 deadline were fully met, Al Jazeera reports. Guterres said governments must include nature-based solutions in coronavirus recovery plans, investing in forests, wetlands, and oceans. And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
If you're an older adult or someone of any age with underlying medical conditions, you're at a higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19. Look, the good news is there are steps you can take to protect yourself and loved ones. Wash your hands often. Stay home unless you need food, medicine, or medical care. If you need to go out, stay at least 6 feet away. Avoid people who are sick and make a plan. Identify and talk with someone who can help care for you if you get sick. Have supplies like medicine and groceries on hand, or find ways to have them brought to you. And remember, wear a cloth face covering when around others. For more information, call Seattle-King County Public Health at 206-477-3977. That's 206-477-3977.
You are listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. Don't forget to log on www.RainierAvenueRadio.world.
All right. Welcome back. This is Rainier Avenue Radio. Daniel. That's why I want the music. Yeah, I'm not play it that loud, but just leave it there, all right? Let's leave it there. You're listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. We are talking about the debate. That's coming up tomorrow, 8 o'clock, the Gubernatorial Debate. We're also just having a general discussion about debates. And of course, you know, the purpose of this is to educate the communities about the issues that are taking place in our communities, to educate our communities, our constituents, the voters, about who's running for office and what that office is and what that office does. Again, just to give you some historical information about presidential debate history. In 1956, University of Maryland student Fred Kahn led an effort to bring the two major presidential candidates, Adlai Stevenson, the Democratic nominee, and President Dwight Eisenhower, the Republican nominee, to the campus for a debate. The various newspapers were contacted and numerous letters were sent in an effort to generate interest and garner support for the proposal. Former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt was among those who received the letter. She replied, Kahn told students of the University of Maryland to be interested, but also other students would be interested. And she was going to forward Kahn's letter to James Finnegan, Adlai Stevenson's campaign manager. At the end of the day, no debate took place. However, that effort by Kahn received national press exposure, and it laid the groundwork for what would be the first debate, the Kennedy-Nixon debates, 4 years later. Then there was a hiatus and started back in 1976, and every year since, there has been a presidential debate. Well, the debates have started to be localized. And again, if you remember last year, for those of you or those of you who've been listening to Rainier Avenue, we did like 18 debates in 2016. And getting the candidates to come in and talk about what was important to our community. And then we did about 15 debates in 2018. for those particular elections. So as we moved into 2016, I thought, well, there's this thing called the Washington State Debate Coalition. Let me find out what it is. And that's when we began to engage. And now we've talked about making sure that, we work together, because at the end of the day, what we want to do is make sure that people are informed. And so my guest again is Whitney Keys from Seattle City Club and Washington State Debate Coalition. Now, one of the concerns, Whitney, is how inclusive is this really? And I know you can't be all things to everybody, but if it's called the Washington State Debate Coalition, and we just have honest, open conversation, who are you trying to reach? With something as important as the gubernatorial debate. If this is going to be the only one, if at this point, the candidates say, hey, there's a debate coalition, we're only going to do one of these, who's your target audience?
Well, for us, the target audience is broad, which is challenging, but it's historically been just anyone throughout the state through those media partners. And so I think historically, as we all know, media landscape has been changing. It's been television in the past, I think predominantly, but this year we were trying to look at radio stations, websites, multimedia platforms, and go a little bit broader. And we get contacted by a lot of different media outlets around the state who want to be a part of this and are letting us know that they're going to put it on their website and try to make it accessible to various people. But we try to go broad. It was a challenge this year, and I'm sure it has been in the past. There are a lot of very compelling races going on that are hyper-local races too. But again, because we're a broad coalition, we only have so many resources. We're trying to focus on the issues that might impact the most people in the state. We don't pick specific races. Like, one of my friends was running, for example, a couple years ago in a specific district. We can't do every single district, so it's hard. We thought about doing the Secretary of State race. We looked at a lot of different initiatives that were going to be on the ballot this year. So it is kind of a tough decision for us as our steering committee sits around a table and says, what do we have the resources to do? Which races are going to be most important in some ways for everyone in the state to be aware of.
And that's process, kind of what I'm talking about. Whitney, what I'm getting at is who's your audience that that you have. Like I said, when we are trying to make sure that we reach people in our community, a very diverse, multicultural, ethnic, neighborhood and community. There may be a rural community. And again, if it's the Washington State Debate Coalition, what can happen with that is that entities and organizations who aren't part of this, can get disregarded. Again, we're doing, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 debates this year. And, part of, okay, well, we have to figure out how we create relationships, because you start to get answers like, well, we're doing a debate with the Washington State Debate Coalition. Well, okay, well, let's find out if the concerns and issues of the community that we represent, are represented by that entity. And, other than that, you'll say, well, you reach a certain demographic, you reach a certain population, which is cool. People can, reach who they want to. But when you start sucking up all the oxygen, it becomes really critical and important that this is more than just, it becomes important that people know that when they can tune into these debates, are they going to get information that is relevant, not just one issue, but things that are relevant to their daily lives or not. That's how you develop a trusted relationship with the community. And so I know it's a big question, and that's one of the reasons why we're looking for a partnership here. But in general, and maybe you can't answer this question, who do you think listens when you do these debates? If you can't do major outreach, who are you trying to make sure that you reach? Maybe it's older voters, maybe it's a particular demographic, maybe it's a demographic with money. Maybe you say it's pretty broad, but in order to do that, that is a dedicated effort. Otherwise, the effort is falling short.
That's true. I think you hit on a couple things with what you were just talking about. going back to one thing that you said, I do think with these, and I know with these types of debates, it's similar to looking at the presidential debates. They cannot get into every single issue. And unfortunately, they can't get into necessarily niche, hyper-local topics that are really relevant to specific counties and cities throughout the country. And we're in the similar situation. We have an hour of time. We have 4 moderators coming from different media outlets and their different audiences and perspectives. We have citizens that have emailed in questions, so we're not going to be able to cover everything. So to be honest, there probably will be people who are disappointed that their specific questions or issues or audiences didn't get met. And then historically, you're again bringing up good points. These debates have been there's been a big focus on TV. And we all know now that I'm a middle-aged white woman and I still have a TV in my living room. I still watch TV, traditional TV occasionally. So that skews compared to like a BIPOC youth who's primarily consuming media on a small mobile device. And so we do have that history. Seattle City Club was started by 8 women who were, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, trying to create a more inclusive environment primarily focused on gender. But Seattle City Club is, I think, historically, and if you look at some of our pre-COVID events, it skews a lot of middle class, white people who are professional, who care about civics and political issues. Where we are now, and since I've been here, we have been starting in the February, March time period. We were in a position where we were able to partner to try to get some funding to create opportunities for people who, number one, may not be able to buy a ticket to come to our programs. Number two, may not normally be in that part of town. Like some of our programs were held in Belltown, Seattle. So that kind of skews again, like tech, Amazon, people who go to that part of the city. And we've been looking at doing programs in completely different parts of the cities, different types of programs. I was really lucky to have some listening sessions with a variety of BIPOC youth who shared very constructive feedback with me about how they would redesign programs and how our experiences can be kind of tailored to their needs to have different conversations. Since we're talking about debate, Tony, a couple of them actually said this kind of very civil, like, hello, let me be polite to you and let me respond to your question. And there was a conversation about, no, I don't want to see those types of debates. I want to see a different type of conversation, or I would like to see a program where people can express themselves in different ways. I also had some of those listening sessions where people shared that if you come into a program where the audience is predominantly white and City Club is talking about criminal justice system, and we're creating this open environment where someone can raise their hand and ask a question, how uncomfortable it is for a young person of color to stand up in front of a group of white people you don't necessarily know, and you're younger and you are a different race, and to have the confidence and courage to ask a question in that forum. So they were really powerful, important listening sessions, and I deeply appreciate the people that took the time to meet with me and give me that feedback. And since I'm a new leader of this organization, I'm all ears and listening, and we're not just listening, we're making these changes. So this year was for the Debate Coalition, getting back to this, again, a team has been working very hard to try to be more inclusive of, again, looking at all different types and non-traditional types of civics-based organizations and any group that really cares about getting access to these debates. And we didn't just stick with political parties or kind of the traditional folks. We tried to look broader. And so we did that work with our small limited resources and team. And anytime any media outlet or group contacted us on the website, then we've kind of pulled them into this broader coalition. So it's not perfect. We're trying. I think we've got lots of room for improvement in the coming years.
Well, and again, since you brought it up, because my experience as a media person was not that it was resistant. you know. And, you know, but I knew that I needed to do what I needed to do because, again, if there's something called the Washington State Debate Association, and we did 16, 18 debates in 2016 and 15 or 18 more in 2018 and in 2020 in trying to reach out to make sure that the goal is consistent, that we're trying to make sure that all voices are heard, then I will endure this white fragility in order to get to the end result, which when I did, which was when I got to you, I found that there was an interest in partnership. And again, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but it's not just that the person who shows up who says, I'm afraid to speak. It is a systemic system that is in place. And so that has to be dealt with as well, you know, in order to make this more inclusive, so that when we're talking about having debates, and I said we were going to have this discussion, when we talk about the importance of people's needs, if there's going to be something called the Washington State Debate Coalition and it is going to fulfill its mission, then, you know, I don't know. I'm not part of it, but my relationship with you thus far has been, okay, let's work together. And so again, we're doing a number of different debates. I don't want to turn into a situation where if I'm not recognized by the Washington State Debate Coalition, then we get more resistance from candidates when we're doing debates that are important. We're hosting candidates from Pierce County, from Snohomish County, from Clark County, from, again, because we think it's important that not only people in South Seattle are aware of what's important to them, but they should be aware of what's important to people in other counties who may be in the same situation and you think you're enduring it alone. And so I look forward to continuing this relationship. And again, it's got to be more, in my opinion, than it's led by the Washington State Debate Coalition, who has no idea about these other things that are going on. Otherwise, it's not an inclusive coalition, and that's not an attack on you. It just is what it is. You're listening to Tony B on RainierAvenueRadio.world. My guest is Whitney Keys from the Seattle City Club, Executive Director of Seattle City Club and the Washington State Debate Coalition. Now, Whitney, I talk, and I'm certainly going to give you a chance to talk about, if you want to, what I just said.
Well, first, I apologize that you've experienced resistance either from candidates or maybe our organization in the past. I know that the Washington State Debate Coalition, we cannot, as I was saying, we cannot cover every single race in the state. And so we need media outlets. We need civics-based groups. There are tons of debates happening, and you guys certainly are creating tremendous access for people to have to these different candidates. So we can only do so much. This year we're only doing 2, but there, as you keep holding up, that voters pamphlet is very thick with a lot of issues and people that the public need to be aware of. So I think it is a partnership, and you're just bringing up good points for me. We're almost done with this season, but we're going to start debriefing and figuring out lessons learned. Where can we improve, and how do we do a better job next year? And I think you're right. We don't want candidates to go to other groups and say, well, because I'm participating over here, I can't participate over there. That defeats the purpose.
And again, Whitney, you know how we get down. We have honest, open conversation, and it was just again, I guess these are things that people would call microaggressions. When you call and you get the feeling that you're not really interested in hearing what I want to say, you're interested in telling me what you want to tell me. And when I'm talking about forming a partnership, that becomes a barrier, and then you start to feel, as though this could turn into something that is going to be a systemic oppression that I'm going to have to deal with. But I got to handle it in a way. Anyway, all that stuff that is beyond first showing up and being intimidated about raising your hand that you have to deal with. And so, again, just bringing it out there because it shouldn't turn into a situation where as media organizations grow and all the oxygen is sucked up by one entity that's calling itself a coalition, and isn't aware, of that impact. And so, again, right now, in particular with COVID and the other things, you've started to see an inclusion of more media and more folks who are starting to understand that they can be the communicators because the technology exists. And that is how this communication is working, and that is how information is being shared. And I'm excited about the opportunity to work together if the goal is to, again, broaden the information platform to include everybody. We can't do everything, but whatever it is, if it's garnering a big piece of the spotlight, then it's important that voices are heard. It's important that voices that may not sound like anyone outside of Horton should hear them doesn't mean that they don't exist, because they do. And so, again, you're in this position, I'm in this position. And so these are things that I'm sharing with you about the importance of, beyond one issue candidates, who discuss things. And we can always work together with this thing called debates. The presidential debates were initially, again, moderated in 76, 80, and 84 by the League of Women Voters. But the Commission of Presidential Debates was established in 1987 by the Republican and Democratic parties. And again, it became this whole issue of who's controlling the debate. And that person, that group, that individual, that whatever controls the narrative, that makes the rules, changes the rules. You're listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world. It's me, Tony B. My guest is Whitney Keys from Seattle City Club and Washington State Debate Coalition. We're talking about debates, and we're definitely going to get back to the Gubernatorial Debate, which is taking place at 8 o'clock. And Whitney, just kind of want to get your feeling about the process. You mentioned your background, and it seems like you were engaged at an early age, and you're engaged now. What is it you think that we can do or that needs to be done to prevent voter apathy? We know that there's voter suppression tactics. We know that folks who are removed from the sphere of influence don't participate in these things because they don't feel like if your vote's going to matter. If you don't have hope, you don't want to vote. Or just anybody in general. What do you think just about the process and what people should do or what we can do to engage folks during this electoral season?
That is such a good point you bring up, because you don't hear as many people talking about voter apathy, and apathy can also come, I think, from voter suppression as well. They can go hand in hand. I think for me, I did grow up in a family. I was lucky to have two parents who were teachers, and I still remember voting at my junior high school, going in physically with my mom and dad, and it was an important process. So they communicated that to me. And back then you'd get a little pin that you would wear that said, I voted, and people were proud of voting, and you weren't afraid of who you voted for or what issues you voted on. And that was very public. So I think some of it is we've lost that now. I think we are so polarized that people are afraid to say that they voted and afraid to talk about which candidate they voted for, which issue they voted for. So to make it something comfortable and normal, and to remind people about how important it is. I mean, as we've seen, in a blink of an eye, we can see policies changed at a national level and a local level. So it's very important. If we are frustrated with things in our society, it's hard work, and voting is just one small step, but it's a very important step. So I think apathy comes from conversations, talking with other people, just as you're doing with this program, raising the issues, making it cool and interesting and important for people to pay attention to those voter guides and know what the issues are, and be able to talk about it and feel like at least with that one vote, you're making a difference.
What about the propensity now for potential misinformation? Well, what can you say to folks? That's one of the reasons for having a debate, is you hope to get the answers. But just in general, there's a lot of ways out there. Internet, on the one hand, it's good. On the other hand, there's a lot of misinformation out there. What would you say to people who are just trying to find out, what the deal is? How do I discern who to vote for, what to vote for?
it's hard right now. I studied communication back in the day when we just had TV stations, radio stations. It was newspapers. It was very simple, and it's hard. Seattle City Club hosts a monthly program called Civic Cocktail, and we had Omari Salisbury on last night, who is a founder of Converge Media, and he was in the Chop Chaz zone on Capitol Hill for over a month, reporting day in and day out. He was walking that district and interviewing people and filming it. And he expressed so much frustration because some traditional media outlets, when I say that, I mean kind of the traditional old school TV stations, radio stations, were misreporting what was happening. And here he was every day reporting on exactly what was happening. And because he was an independent, non-traditional journalist and media outlet, I think he wasn't getting the respect, and people weren't seeing it as factual information. And he did share that the Associated Press, which is, again, a legitimate old school media outlet that shares news and photos, especially with other media outlets, that they actually were one of the few outlets that picked up the phone and called him and said, Omari, is this true? Can you give us some facts? We know that you're there. We've been following your Twitter feed. So I think, Tony, it's hard. And so the responsibility does really fall on us. And Omari gave great advice, like don't just listen to your one TV station or listen to your one radio station. You have to be open. You said this earlier in this program too, like do your homework, look all around, talk to different people. Don't just talk to people in your circle. One of our board members, Maria McDaniel, always reminds us of that. Just broaden your circle, broaden your horizon, strike up a conversation with someone who's different from you, whether they look different from you, they think differently from you, they live in a different location from you. Get as much information as you can. I also think that it's hard to do that. So you can divide and conquer, find some good friends that care about your same issues and maybe see if they'll pay attention to some other media outlets and you cover some and you can have a conversation. Or as you mentioned earlier, lean on family members. But it's hard in this day and age with so many different social media platforms. But I think at the same time, it's wonderful because we don't just have our blinders on, and we do have access to tremendous amounts of information and different perspectives. So as you said, there's good and bad to all this different information that's out there through different channels.
We're almost out of time. Whitney, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Tony. I love this conversation. It's been wonderful to talk to you about this. And I am so impressed with the volume of quality, not just the volume, because you've mentioned these numbers, but the quality of programming that you're doing, making these issues and candidates available to your listeners too. So I will commit that City Club will do a better job in the future of making sure that we're aware of that. And it'd be wonderful if you want to be a part of this coalition, or others. I know you're so good at supporting youth and interns in your organization. So we'll find some good ways to keep partnering.
Cool. And you know what I do? And again, I do remember now how we got, because you all reached out to me. That I didn't contact you. And I remember that now. Y'all reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to be involved. And I think it was boot camp or something like that.
Oh, maybe so. Yeah, that's another program of ours.
Yeah, and that's when we got into this conversation.
Well, great. It's all meant to be.
So again, my guest, Whitney Keys, tomorrow, 8 o'clock, we're taking a stream. If those of you who are saying, hey, I watch Rainier Avenue Radio, we'll have it. But there are some other ways that you can watch this, and that's part of the building the coalition to make sure that community members can tune in and turn on. And I'm sure, what's the main, is it Cairo? Is that the main?
Well, we have a number of them. It's King 5.
King 5. Oh, I said
Cairo 7.
Yes.
Como.
Uh-huh.
Q13. I'll just list the TV stations.
Okay.
TVW.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the main TV stations.
All
but
right.
I love listening to radio, so I know that it's great that you're streaming it. And so that's another way that people can access it, and just listen to those words and listen to what people are saying. Don't be distracted by what's going on visually.
All right. Again, Whitney, thanks for joining us on Rainier Avenue Radio. The debate should be a way for you to gain more information on those who are running. We'll have a number of debates for you coming up on Rainier Avenue Radio: justice positions, congressional positions, legislative positions. Of course, 37th District will be having both Position 1, Position 2. We'll be getting folks who are running for Senate. And again, you'll be able to hear races in Spokane, races from Clark County, races from Kitsap County, because not only should you know about statewide issues impacting your community, you should want to hear about how they're impacting other communities as well. That's it. That's all the time that I'll have. Tune in tomorrow, 8 o'clock. For the the gubernatorial debate. And then on Thursday, we'll be having the Black Candidates Forum from Pierce County. Black candidates in Pierce County will be talking, hosted by the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, and then that will be hosted by City of Tacoma Mayor Victoria Woodard. She will be the MC, if you will, for the event. Mayor Strickland, who's former mayor, is running for the 10th congressional district. That's a DC position as a representative. Then Tawina Nobles is running for 28th congressional Washington State, and that's in Pierce County. And then also Melanie Morgan is running for 29th congressional or legislative, and that's Washington State House. So 3 black candidates in Pierce County. We'll also be able to talk to you about the black candidates in King County, the black candidates in Snohomish County, and just everywhere races. So that's it. That's all the time we have, and we'll be back with you tomorrow for the gubernatorial debate. Peace.